For more than half a century, a grand geopolitical illusion has been broadcast to the world. We are told that the era of empires is dead, replaced by a modern community of equal sovereign nations. But if you stand in the blistering heat of the Sahel region, that illusion shatters completely. Here, independence was never truly granted. It was merely repackaged. A major Western superpower, claiming to have left its former colonies decades ago, never actually packed its bags. Instead, it replaced its occupying armies with an invisible web of economic shackles, unequal defense treaties, and a suffocating monetary system designed to extract wealth while keeping the local populations in a state of permanent dependency. For decades, presidents and prime ministers in this region played along with the charade. They were installed, protected, and often overthrown by the very superpower that claimed to be their greatest ally. It was a flawless system of modern vassalage, a perfectly engineered trap that seemed impossible to escape. The superpower held all the cards: the diplomatic leverage, the military bases, and the global media narrative. Anyone who dared to speak out against this parasitic arrangement was quickly silenced, either through economic strangulation or sudden, mysterious regime changes. The grip was absolute, and the international community accepted it as the natural order of things. But empires, no matter how invisible or sophisticated, eventually breed their own undoing. They push too hard, extract too much, and underestimate the simmering rage of a generation that has nothing left to lose. The system was meticulously designed to crush political dissidents and seasoned diplomats, but it was completely unprepared for a young, battle-hardened soldier who simply refused to play by the established rules of international diplomacy. To understand how a superpower is humiliated and expelled, you have to look away from the glittering diplomatic galas in European capitals and stare directly into the bloody dirt of the front line. This is where our central figure emerges. He is not a polished politician groomed in Western universities. He is a young military captain, barely in his mid-30s, whose entire career has been forged in the crucible of a relentless, brutal insurgency. For years, he and his men bled in the dust, fighting ghost-like militant groups that seemed to operate with total impunity. And right alongside them, supposedly there to help, were the elite counterterrorism forces of the Western superpower. Yet, as the years dragged on, the young captain noticed a terrifying paradox. The more the superpower intervened, the worse the security situation became. The foreign troops, armed with state-of-the-art drones and advanced weaponry, seemed bizarrely incapable of neutralizing the threat. Instead, they acted as an occupying force, securing vital mining logistics and establishing permanent bases while the local population was slaughtered just miles outside their perimeter wires. The captain realized that the foreign military presence was not a shield. It was a carefully managed containment strategy designed to justify endless intervention and maintain geopolitical dominance over a resource-rich geography. The anger in the barracks began to boil over. The local soldiers were tired of dying in a war they suspected was being artificially prolonged. They were tired of taking orders from foreign officers who treated them with thinly veiled contempt. The young captain channeled this rage. He saw the corrupt civilian government in his capital city not as leaders but as mere middle managers for a foreign corporation. The tipping point arrived when the security situation reached a catastrophic low. Entire villages were wiped out, and the foreign superpower offered nothing but hollow diplomatic statements and requests for deeper military integration. It was a blatant insult. The captain understood that sovereignty cannot be delegated, and freedom is never financed by the very entity holding the mortgage. In a swift, decisive move, driven by the sheer desperation of the lower ranks, the military apparatus shifted, the civilian proxies were swept aside, and the young captain stepped into the absolute center of the political arena. He was not wearing a bespoke suit, he was wearing a combat fatigue, his face covered in a tactical mask broadcasting a clear, unmistakable message. The era of polite, subservient diplomacy was officially over. The immediate aftermath of a regime change is usually predictable. The new leadership rushes to appease the global powers, promising stability and a quick return to the established order. The superpower expected exactly this. They issued the standard diplomatic condemnations, threatened to cut off financial aid, and waited for the young captain to come begging to Paris or Washington for legitimacy. Or they fundamentally miscalculated the psychology of a man who had already accepted the possibility of his own death on the battlefield. You cannot intimidate someone who has nothing to lose with the threat of economic sanctions. The captain did not apologize. Instead, he launched a methodical, breathtakingly audacious campaign to dismantle a 70-year-old neocolonial architecture in a matter of months. The first strike was psychological and diplomatic. He ordered the immediate expulsion of the superpower's ambassador. This was unthinkable. In this part of the world, foreign ambassadors acted like imperial viceroys, dictating domestic policy behind closed doors. Kicking one out was a massive public humiliation that shattered the aura of invincibility the superpower relied upon. The global media went into a frenzy, painting the captain as an erratic, dangerous populist. But on the streets of his capital, the masses roared in approval. For the first time in generations, they saw a leader looking the empire straight in the eye without blinking. The second strike targeted the physical manifestation of the empire's grip, the military bases. The captain utilized the very treaties the superpower had written against them. He cited a clause allowing either party to terminate the military cooperation agreement with 1 month's notice. He handed them the eviction papers. The superpower was stunned. They tried to stall, utilizing back-channel pressures, threatening to collapse the fragile national economy. But the captain held firm, mobilizing the youth to protest around the foreign military installations. He weaponized the collective outrage of his population, turning the streets into an insurmountable political obstacle. The foreign troops, once the undisputed masters of the region, found themselves confined to their bases, surrounded by thousands of angry citizens demanding their departure. The optics were devastating. The mighty Western military machine was effectively neutralized by popular defiance and cold, calculated legal maneuvering. They had no choice but to pack up their advanced hardware, board their transport planes, and leave under the cover of darkness. It was a staggering geopolitical defeat, broadcast live to a continent that was suddenly waking up to the realization that the empire was, in fact, a paper tiger. But expelling soldiers and diplomats is only the first phase of true liberation. The empire's most insidious weapon was not the rifle. It was the currency and the media. The captain knew that if he did not break the economic chains, his physical victory would be meaningless. The nation's financial system was entirely tethered to a colonial currency, managed and printed by the former colonial master. The superpower controlled the foreign exchange reserves, effectively holding the nation's entire economy hostage. Breaking this bond is the equivalent of economic suicide for a developing nation, as it triggers immediate capital flight and crushing inflation. The captain initiated a radical pivot. He began bypassing the traditional Western financial institutions entirely. He sought out new multipolar alliances, engaging with Eastern powers who were more than eager to disrupt the Western monopoly in Africa. These new partners offered military hardware, agricultural technology, and infrastructure investments without the suffocating ideological lectures and political conditionalities demanded by the West. This was a masterstroke in geopolitical balancing. By introducing fierce competition into the region, the captain overnight transformed his nation from a captive market into a highly sought-after strategic pivot point. Simultaneously, he waged an aggressive counteroffensive in the information domain. The superpower utilized its massive global media conglomerates to flood the airwaves with narratives of impending doom, predicting that the captain's nation would collapse into anarchy without their guiding hand. They funded proxy civil society groups to foment internal unrest. The captain responded by banning the superpower's state-sponsored media outlets from broadcasting within his borders. He recognized that foreign media was not practicing journalism. They were conducting psychological operations designed to demoralize his population and manufacture consent for a counter-coup. He took control of the narrative, utilizing domestic broadcasting to speak directly to the rural populations, bypassing the compromised elite in the capital. He framed the struggle not just as a fight for security, but as a holy war for total sovereignty. He demanded that the local mining contracts, which for decades had been heavily skewed in favor of Western multinational corporations extracting gold and uranium, be immediately audited and aggressively renegotiated. He made it violently clear that the era of extracting raw materials to fuel European power grids, while his own citizens lived in darkness, was permanently finished. If the foreign corporations did not agree to fair terms, their licenses would be revoked and handed to eager competitors from Asia. The empire was being squeezed out of every sector: military, diplomatic, economic, and informational. The true terror for the expelled superpower was not just the loss of one specific country. The terror was the contagion effect. The young captain had successfully demonstrated a proof of concept. He had shown the entire continent that it is entirely possible to stand up to a global hegemon, demand your dignity, and actually survive. His actions sent shockwaves across the region. Neighboring nations, suffering under the exact same neo-colonial arrangements, began to look at their own compromised leaders with intense scrutiny. The aura of Western invincibility was permanently broken. A geopolitical domino effect had been initiated. In rapid succession, military and civilian movements in adjacent countries began adopting the captain's playbook. They too demanded the expulsion of foreign troops, the renegotiation of predatory economic treaties, and the assertion of genuine national sovereignty. The superpower found itself rapidly retreating from a continent it had considered its exclusive backyard for over a century. The captain had not just freed his own nation, he had triggered a historic, tectonic shift in the global balance of power. He proved that absolute military and financial superiority cannot permanently suppress the collective will of a population pushed to the brink of survival. He showed that true power does not always reside in aircraft carriers or luxury boardrooms in Paris or Washington. Sometimes true power resides in the unyielding determination of a single individual willing to absorb the immense pressure of global isolation to secure the future of his people. The captain stands today at the center of a newly forming geopolitical axis, heavily fortified, immensely popular at home, and despised by the old empires of the West. But his survival is still not guaranteed. The expelled superpower has a long memory and infinite resources. They are quietly funding proxy insurgencies, attempting to crash his currency, and waiting patiently for the young leader to make a fatal miscalculation. The chessboard has simply been reset, and the stakes are higher than ever. To maintain this fragile, newly won independence, the captain must navigate a terrifying labyrinth of global espionage, economic warfare, and shifting alliances. How does a newly sovereign nation protect its borders and its wealth when the world's most powerful intelligence agencies are actively conspiring to tear it apart from the inside? What happens when the old empire decides to strike back, not with uniformed soldiers but with an invisible army of economic saboteurs and digital assassins? Stay tuned, because the true war for the future of the continent is only just beginning.